What do you make of the apology?
You know, we're at the point where it's unheard of, really, that the Met apologises or settles any case. So for that, we feel like, oh, that is a victory, and we'll take it. But, you know, we've been in negotiations for months because we weren't happy with the apology. There was no apology, really. I mean, they said their actions were appropriate that night.
Their actions were appropriate. I mean, it sounds like a typo, doesn't it? It sounds like you think, oh, they must be meaning inappropriate.
Oh, you mean inappropriate? No, they still stand by that. But meanwhile, they now recognise our motivations for going. In that sense, I feel seen and heard for our motivations because they've been questioned this whole time, so...
The language, though, you know, the letters that you received, I regret that your opportunity to express your grief and anger was curtailed by your arrest and removal. I mean, this is a violent sort of act we were talking about here, isn't it? I mean, the photo of you, the kind of iconic image of you being kind of pinned down by the police.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's been a kind of reflection, a real reflection of what actually happened?
I think, you know, immediately after it happened, they really jumped on the media bandwagon. They just said a lot of things in the media that I don't think were true at all. You know, saying we were violent and we threw things like that. I didn't see any of that. All I saw was male and female police officers being violent and aggressive towards myself and others.
Let's talk a bit, shall we, about what happened on that evening. And I remember it so well myself. You know, it was kind of in the middle of COVID, wasn't it? The Sarah Everard murder, I think, struck so many women and girls so deeply, and I can completely understand the sort of impulse to go out and to make yourselves heard, to make your voices heard at that point. I mean, you'd never been to a protest before, had you?
Yeah, I'd really never done anything like that before. So, you know, it was a vigil. It was, you know, I feel a lot of people say it was a protest, but
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a vigil.
Yeah.
It's actually an important distinction.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people just seem to think that a group of people started talking about things and chanting, and it wasn't like that. It was someone was peacefully saying, we shouldn't have to deal with this. This is not OK. We should be able to trust our police officers. And that's when they moved in, so.
What was your memory of that night?
Oh, wow. It's such a blur that night. But I remember really needing to go there and to stand with other women because there's a lot of... People dismiss what women go through and the abuse they go through, and the way they dismiss them is saying, well, you shouldn't have worn that, you shouldn't have done that. And it was a moment, I mean, people spoke about, oh, but Sarah Everard was in a well-lit road and she was well covered, and it was like they can no longer point fingers, and it was this moment, actually, it's never our fault. It's not our fault. So there was this feeling of really wanting to stand there and feel... I wanted to feel so validated in my experience. But then the Met Police stood in front when there was some chanting against them, which we have every right to, because one of their officers murdered and raped an innocent woman. And from that moment, it was kind of like the experience of being silenced again. Don't you dare be angry. Express your grief, but limit it and make sure you don't speak about it. So it's a blur that night.
And at one point, you remember someone holding out their hand to you at the protest?
Yeah, so that's how it began, is that, you know, there's a lot of questioning. People like, but why did you go on the bandstand? Why this, why that? We've never been able to talk about it before. So me and Dania haven't shared our stories. When we did today, you know, my story is that I went to go and put the candle up at the front of at the bandstand edge where the flowers were, and a woman, you know, people were being manhandled, and a woman put out her arm and said, can you come up and help? And we moved the flowers away and got up. Today I found out that woman was Dania.
I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It was a big moment for us to realise that, because...
You can give her a hug as well.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I didn't want to. Oh, God. Yeah,
it's a
so
huge
weird.
moment. I mean, I remember the women being heavily handled on the bandstand, and I had, like, there was a split moment. If I join them, and then maybe it starts a bit of a trend, and we all in solidarity, maybe there's too many of us, we're standing against them, and they won't arrest us, and they will stop, they will leave us alone. Climbed, it was kind of a dramatic moment, climbed over the bandstand and put my hand out, and Patsy was the only one that joined me. And then we wrapped our arms around each other to kind of protect ourselves from the arrest. But then obviously everyone got really heavily handled after that point. But we just realised today it was...
And amazing that you describe it as wrapping your arms around each other, protecting each other at the protest, and it feels like that is what you're doing now, taking on the Met together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and but there's more women from that as well. You know, it wasn't just us. It was there were other people that were arrested. There were other women there that night who faced that assault from police officers. Like myself, I was covered in bruises by the end of it. You know, I know one of the women fractured her wrist, apparently. So do you know what I mean? It was heavy-handed. When I say heavy-handed, I mean aggressively so.
I read a quote for you, and we did discuss this before, when you said that it reminded you of your experience of domestic abuse. You don't have to talk about it at all if you don't want to. It's completely up to you. But if you did want to sort of explain a little bit more about what you meant by that, then you can do.
Yeah, around a decade ago, I almost lost my life to domestic abuse. And after the situation after that happened was even worse because I felt like I was being silenced and blamed, and the process to go through it with the police, there was no empathy and you kind of left alone. And so I just became a shell of myself and I minimised myself. And so going to this vigil and trying to find my voice and stand with other women and express this grief, and then getting arrested and handled the way we did, it brought me back to that time of being silenced, and I was like, I couldn't do it. I didn't want to go ahead with the civil claim. I kind of shied away. It was only until they convicted me a year and a half later that the anger really,
They convicted you? This is the other thing that I can't quite get my head around. What happened there?
So a year and a half later, a journalist reached out and said, you know, how do you feel about being prosecuted by the Met Police? I was like, what? I didn't receive anything. And they were able to do that under the single justice procedure. A hearing went without me, without knowing it was for the COVID fine, but I received no communication. And it was, had it not been public and had we not had an incredible legal team of women that have really helped us through this process, I would have lost hope, to be honest with you. I'd be like, I've got a criminal record now. I don't know how to fight this. I don't know what I've done wrong. And it would have, you know, and if it wasn't public, you think maybe other people are experiencing this.
It's extraordinary. And I've interviewed you before, and something that you said then has really sort of stayed with me when you said, I thought you could never be arrested unless you had done something wrong. And I kind of feel that is such a big part of this story as well. And if you can't trust the police, then where does it leave you as a society? Yeah,
I think, you know, the main point that always needs to be amplified is that this has been happening to black and brown people for a long, long time. Police brutality, like, for ages. And, you know, that systemic racism that we've seen from the Casey report and other things that have come out. And I think, you know, what happened to us at the vigil opened up other people's eyes to this could happen to other people as well, which it shouldn't have gone like that. You know, we should have been listening from the start. But even myself, I was ignorant towards it. Now we've got a chance where we're saying, look, it really is this bad. No one's exaggerating. And I hate that it's taken this as well to push for it. But I hope that people also recognise that as well as the misogyny, there's institutional racism, homophobia, ableism, the list goes on, and they're not fit for purpose.
I would, on some of the issues that you talk about there, I would actually quite like to get your reaction to news today about Child Q. Now, this, if you remember, is the 15-year-old girl who was pulled out of school. She was strip searched while on her period. And the Met have today admitted overusing their power to strip search children and admitted that this person was treated differently because she was a girl, but also because she was black. What's your sort of reaction to this story as well?
Every single time, even though there's been so many stories about police officers abusing, you know, innocent people across the country, and it's not just the Met Police, every time it's heartbreaking. It's just like, did they actually do that? And then you're like, oh, of course they did, because they've got these powers that they've been given, which only is getting stronger. You know, there's new acts in place. And their vetting system is really poor and they're letting in people, you know, with past histories, and there's 1 in 5 police officers in the misconduct system and, you know, are abusive themselves. So is it really a surprise? It's awful to... It's a sobering moment to realise how bad this is. You're like, how did it get here?
Do you trust the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, to sort it out?
No. I think that he is better at talking than Cressida Dick was. I think that he's very good at giving lip service. He's very good at talking about things that he wants to change and, you know, he's going to do this and going to do that. He doesn't... I don't think he cares, in my opinion. You know, I did a video with Led by Donkeys that was put onto New Scotland Yard of every single time something like this happens, there's too much public pressure. It's like a pressure valve. There's too much, and they release it with, we've got a new commissioner. Don't worry, we'll reform. And they don't. Time and time again. It just resets the media. It resets public pressure, and it ends up being forgotten about. And that's what we cannot let happen again. Right now, we need to keep up the public pressure on the police. They need to absolutely radically reform the entire institution or abolish it, if I'm honest. I think I'm at that point. I never thought I'd say that I agree with abolishment, but it's looking like it's a good idea in my books.